Welcome to the Childcare Genius Podcast, the world's #1 community for brilliant childcare leaders. Each episode will feature interviews with the brightest minds in the childcare industry to guide you into becoming a smarter business leader. Our hosts have opened 10 schools while raising 5 children. They are certified business coaches, best-selling authors, and have personally helped thousands of childcare owners around the world achieve incredible growth. Let's welcome to the Childcare Genius Podcast, Brian and Carol Dupre.
Welcome to episode 13 of the Childcare Genius Podcast.
We're your hosts, Brian and Carol Dupre.
We're excited for this episode, I tell you what. We have a special guest who's going to be joining us today, and he's become a good friend. His name is Blake Sanders. He works for Aleaf Insurance, which is a proud sponsor of the Childcare Genius Podcast. So Blake has been in the childcare insurance field for over 10 years, and he lives in Texas, so he talks a little bit funny. But he specializes in helping childcare owners have insurance protection, and they have peace of mind with it. We've been with Aleaf, I think, for 5 or 6 years now, and they have been an incredible insurance agency. We have peace of mind knowing that we are protected. And we wanted to bring him on the episode because we know there's a lot of childcare owners out there right now that just use their local insurance agent, and they are not fully protected. And we weren't fully protected until we met Aleaf and knew exactly what we need. So, you would not go to a podiatrist if you have a heart problem. You'd go to a specialist. You'd go to a cardiologist. And you'd want to go to a childcare insurance specialist should you need insurance for your childcare business.
And today we're going to discuss the types of coverage that you need to stay protected.
Yeah, it's not a sales pitch. So regardless of whether you ever call Aleaf or not, we want to make sure that you know what you need to protect yourself and your family. So we're going to talk today about the absolute minimum coverage amounts you need and actually the minimum amount of coverages you need. Like I said, whether you use Aleaf or not, these are the coverages you need to protect yourself and your family.
And let's get Blake on the line.
Hey, Blake, welcome to the Childcare Genius Podcast. How you doing today?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, we're doing all right. Where are you calling from today?
Dallas, Texas.
Texas? Oh, man, it must be hot down there.
Usually stays that way. We have pretty much summer and winter, and that's it, no in between.
We have summer, winter, spring, and fall all the same day here in Maine. This time of year, it's 30 in the morning, so you have your heat on. You start taking about maybe noon, you're putting the air conditioner on because it's hitting the 70s, you're hot. And then by about 5 o'clock, you turn the heat on again. So that we experience all the 4 seasons all in one day in the spring and the fall here. It's kind of crazy. So we're going to talk about insurance today. Probably one of the least favorite topics people like to talk about. Correct. But it's probably one of the most important things to talk about because if you're not properly protected, you could lose everything. Am I right?
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. People don't like to talk about legal stuff and insurance, but it's so darn important. And I don't think I ever realized how important it was until you're threatened with litigation on maybe a human rights complaint or even a parent falling or a kid falling on your property, which we've had all that happen. So we wanted to come up with an episode today to help people look for those hidden blind spots and reduce some of that liability. So we'll get to know you a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit more insurance.
Yeah,
sounds good.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this line of work?
Yeah, so I am actually married. I have 2 kids. I have an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old. The 18-year-old just graduated last year, and she's off to Mary Hardin Baylor studying biology and playing a little softball. So that made expenses a little bit cheaper on the parents to get to school. We actually have moved here recently. So I have my younger starting in a new school this past year, but everything seems to be good. A little bit smaller school, smaller town. So he's enjoying it. We're enjoying it. So far, so good. But kind of how I got into the business is kind of a crazy story. So probably, 20 years ago, I guess, 25, my wife actually worked in a child care center as a teacher, and she spent 10, 11 years in two different centers. Worked her way up from teacher to assistant director to finally director, which she stayed about the last 3 years. She was the director, and we became good friends with the owner. And he had a daughter that would help with the business, but really wasn't what she wanted to do. He actually wound up passing away, and we started getting into conversations with the daughter about purchasing the business because she was looking to move deep South Texas and just wasn't what she wanted to do. Made us a fantastic offer. And my wife came to me. I was like, let's do it. This makes perfect sense. It's a great opportunity. But she was like, oh, there's so much liability. I'm scared to take on that risk. I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, anything can happen. I mean, a teacher could abuse a kid. I mean, she's like, I don't feel like I have full control. I'm like, well, you're the director. You kind of run the school now. I mean, you are in full control. She's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, if something happens, it's the owner's responsibility, not necessarily mine. So I said, you know what? I understand, but before we just say no, let me see if I can do some research. Let's call our current agent. Let's make some phone calls and see what we can really figure out just to alleviate some of the stress. So we did. I picked up the phone, called my insurance agent that was insuring my house and my auto. I was like, hey, we're looking at buying this childcare facility. Can you insure it? He was like, I'm sure I can. I said, okay, well, how many of them do you insure? He was like, none. I'm like, okay, well, what kind of insurance would I need? He's like, I don't know, but I can find out. I'm like, okay, well, do you have anybody maybe you know on the commercial side from a business standpoint that you might can refer me to? Maybe I can talk to them. So he did. He gave me another agent that they had sent some of their commercial business to, and I called him, and it was almost like the same thing. We can do it, really don't know a lot about it. So that I'm like, okay, well, maybe my wife's onto something here. Nobody really can give us good answers on how to protect ourselves as business owners in the childcare world. So then I just became nosy. So I just started making phone call. And you pretty much get the same thing every time. Somebody might insure one or two of them. I couldn't get enough information to feel good about the decision. So ultimately, we passed on the opportunity, but I was still intrigued with it. So I had some other people I knew in the childcare world and finally found an owner that felt comfortable talking about their policy. I'm like, okay. And it was amazing. I think I talked to 4. None of them, on the first conversation, knew what company insured them or even knew their agent for that matter. So finally get to the nuts and bolts, and we have some good conversations. And I'm like, okay, well, I've already passed on the deal, but now I'm starting to understand this thing a little bit better. And then really sat down and talked to the wife. I'm like, hey, we went through this. This opportunity based on comfort level of not being able to properly protect ourselves. I think I'm going to go and pursue this as a career because we can't be the only ones in this position. Like there's got to be other people out there that are just don't have the comfort level being for sure what they're getting into. And one thing led to another, wound up in the commercial insurance side, and primary focus was on childcare just to see if we could help other people out there that were in our situation. And not only that, current owners who might not have the correct coverage and getting them to understand what kind of risks they're really at by not covering themselves properly. So it's just one of those deals that opportunity presented itself, a bunch of research came behind. So I thought, you know what, I think there's a need for this in this marketplace. So that's kind of what got me into the childcare side of insurance.
Love that. It's funny how a need sometimes turns into a desire. And we got in the childcare business by accident, kind of the same way you got in there. And we saw a need in the community. Couldn't afford daycare with 5 kids anyway. So, it kind of fit perfect for us. We love Aleaf. you're with Aleaf Childcare Insurance, and the owner of Aleaf and I have been friends for many years, and so they're a proud sponsor of this podcast. So this podcast is being sponsored by Aleaf Insurance. Not that we'd have you in there because of that; it's because we personally use Aleaf. We write that check every single month because we know you guys are protecting us. So we highly recommend Aleaf Childcare Insurance to
Right.
protect your childcare center.
We
So Blake, can you
appreciate
tell our
that.
listeners what insurance childcare owners need at a minimum? That's, I think, what people are looking for. Like, what kind of minimum coverage do they need, and what actually do they need? I know there's so many different terminologies floating around when it comes to insurance, and some people don't understand everything when it comes to it. So if you can kind of lay out what the minimum they need, and that's a good starting point for us, I think.
Okay, absolutely. So what I'm going to kind of do is just run through the general, I guess, needs, you could say, of a policy. Some people are going to need these things, some won't. Some will own their building, some won't. Some will provide transportation, some won't. But just to kind of real quick do a hit through kind of all the different lines, I figure would be the way we can go with that. So we'll jump right in, and let's just start from a property side of it. So what we're seeing right now is the people who are currently buying schools in this market condition are actually insured better than the people who have, let's say, bought their school 10, 15, 20 years ago and have been with the same agent with the same policy. So what we're seeing, I'm sure it's up there where you guys are like it is down here. The cost of property back 2, 3, 4 years ago, it's probably half of what it is today. So what we're starting to see when I go out and meet with customers, what they were in a $500,000 building, and that's what I see on their policy they're insured for, based on construction costs today, it's going to cost $750,000 to $1 million to truly replace that. So we're seeing a lot of people who have had that policy in place for quite some time are actually undercovered should something happen, fire, storm, things of that nature. They probably can't replace what they have. So that's one of the things we've seen. What I would tell anyone to do, get on realtor.com somewhere, just kind of get to know your area and look and see where those price per square foot is. Make sure you're insured to that. So that would be where I would start on the property side. Then you'll come down to your business personal property. If you're talking to a banker, they're going to call it your FF&E, furnitures, fixtures, and equipments. So same thing, different terminology between banking and insurance. That take a deep look at what you have. So I couldn't put a dollar figure on anyone because all schools are different shapes, sizes. We're all going to have different pricing, whether it be our learning aids, our computer equipment, furniture, all the things of that nature. But just think, what would it take to replace everything I put into this school? And what we see a lot of people not take into consideration, as owners, you're spending money every week bringing new things into the school, but yet we're not thinking about that from an insurance standpoint to replace it. We did this policy 3 years ago. We said 300,000 was good. Okay, well, over the last 3 years, how much money have you invested by updating things or bringing in new learning aids, again, updating your computer equipment into the center? So that's one thing to keep in mind. Kind of following on the property piece, business income. So a lot of people we're seeing out there on the business income side, they have a set dollar figure. That I would highly suggest not to have. You need to have in your policy what we would call ALS. So what that actually means is your actual loss sustained. So if something, let's say, Brian, your school, you had a fire, you had to shut down for 6 months to rebuild, 12 months, whatever that cost may be. Well, we still want to keep our staff. We still want to have a profit line coming in. Well, that's where your business income is really going to step in. And actual loss sustain, all that's saying is we're not putting a limit on what we can pay you to keep paying your payroll, to keep paying your profit line. It's whatever it costs over that 6 to 12 months. Most policies are going to sit at a 12-month span to be able to get you back right. So you may have an incident where it costs you $400,000. but someone else may have one that costs 1.2 million. That's where ALS really comes into play. So always make sure on a policy, I would always recommend looking at actual loss sustained. Another key on the property side is your outdoor property. So playgrounds, fence, signage. And one thing people don't think of, your ground covering. Some people have surfacing, some people have turf. That's not cheap. But if we're not scheduling that in the property coverage, there's not going to be coverage for it if you were to need it. The building will be covered. And I've seen playground equipment out there, $50, $60, $100,000 big elaborate playgrounds, but yet they didn't have any coverage for it. Some companies out there will lump that in and give you a standard, let's just say $50,000 in outdoor property. But what you run into, let's just say your outdoor property is damaged. If you're lumped into your property, you're paying the deductible based upon your property. And here in Texas, any kind of coastal areas near the ocean, you're probably paying 1% to 2% a deductible. So if I have something damaged that's $50,000, but it's lumped into $1 million school, well, that 1%, I really don't have insurance on my playground. It's on there, I have it, but my deductible is higher than the playground equipment's worth. So I always recommend scheduling out that property, because if I have this $50,000 playground scheduled out, well, now I'm just paying the 1% of $50,000. Now I have true coverage on that outdoor property. So that's another thing to look for in your policies from a property standpoint. Here's the crazy one, and we experience this here in Texas. Oh, maybe the flood policy. So what a lot of people are under the assumption of is I have property coverage. No matter what happens to my property, I'm covered. You're true, outside of rising water and flood. If that happens, we got 15 inches of rain here in a matter of hours a few weeks ago, and we had a lot of businesses flood. If those businesses did not carry a flood policy, they have zero coverage. And what you want to look at with flood, you're going to be able to cover yourself to $500,000 up to $1 million on the building. Don't leave out your contents, because those things will be ruined as well if your building is flooded. So two things, that the building and contents on the flood, those are two very, very overlooked policies that we see a lot of people don't have. And hurricanes down in Florida, so I can't tell you how many phone calls we get. Oh goodness, the storm's coming. We need coverage now. Well, we can apply for your coverage, but there's a 30-day waiting period to prevent people out there from just trying to buy it for 3 days and then cancel. So it takes 30 days from when you apply for a flood insurance policy to actually let it go into effect. So just something to think about. Don't wait until it's too late, because there's nothing you can do to stop it if we do. So that's kind of the property side in a nutshell. So I would say let's move on to the general liability. And this is, to me, one of the more interesting ones. So your general liability, and we do see most centers out there have that $1 million policy. But what the misconception is it's going to cover if one of our students gets hurt. Well, if you really look and read that policy, which I understand nobody wants to read a 150-page policy. It's a bunch of legal terms and lawyer language that the average person just doesn't understand. But one thing in the general liability policy, it excludes injury to child. So if one of your students gets hurt on your property, you cannot just activate that general liability policy to take care of that child. The child's parents are going to have to sue you. Well, now we've got a PR nightmare. Our name's out there that we're having to be sued because something happened. We have a coverage out there that can help protect that, which we're going to get to that in a little bit later. One of the other things to look in when you're looking at your general liability is, what are your sublimits? A lot of policies out there have sublimits for your abuse and molestation and your professional liability. Well, the abuse and molestation side, if there is a sublimit, a lot of times we're seeing anywhere from just $50,000 maybe up to 300,000. 50,000 is probably not going to get you in a courtroom if you have a case for any type of abuse, whether it be physical or sexual. So to me, 50,000, you pretty much just don't have coverage. I would recommend at minimum, your abuse and molestation should match your general liability. So if you're going to carry $1 million general liability policy that's really there just to cover if a parent comes in, gets injured, has a slip and fall, something like that, I would at least carry $1 million if a child were to be abused physically or sexually. Because if that happens, that's the biggest lawsuit we typically see in the child care world. And that's a coverage point that I don't think a lot of us have enough of. Another one, if I'm going to have my abuse there, I'm also going to have my professional liability there too. And a lot of times we don't look at the professional liability on a policy the way it's supposed to be. So just one thing, for instance, that's probably never thought of. We act in a professional state because a lot of centers out there, we're administering medication to children. I have actually seen a claim come through because the child wound up getting the correct medicine with the correct dosage. The school had just put someone else's medication in his backpack to send home. That was enough to spark a lawsuit from the parent. So again, nothing bad happened. It was an honest mistake. The wrong bag of medicine got put in the wrong bag. And that triggered a lawsuit. So the world today has gotten crazy. Everybody seems to be so happy, unfortunately. So again, another way just to protect yourself from accidents happening, $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. And you can almost look at that across the board for any policy you carry, again, outside of property, because that's going to have a real estate value to it. But $1 million at minimum for any type of liability policy you have out there, I would strongly recommend. So staying with that same $1 million, your auto. So for those of you who do have transportation, on the personal side, we're all used to hearing, okay, I've got 100, 300, 100. I know I got three numbers. So all that really means is I have $100,000 to cover someone per person, $300,000 to cover any injury for the entire accident, and then another $100,000 to cover the vehicle, the building, whatever may have been involved in the accident. On the commercial side, you want to make sure your policies don't have that. We want to look for the term CSL, so your combined single limit. And the difference is, so let's just say $1 million again. So instead of, let's say an accident does happen and there's $500,000 for one person in medical bills. Well, guess what? That falls within the $1 million combined single limit. We're not limited to those three different numbers of per person and per accident. We can use that $1 million any way that needs to be used. So any way they see fit, whether it be per person, per accident, or you know what? Nobody got injured, but we lost control and hit a house. Okay, that's fine. We've got $1 million to be able to cover the property that was run into. So that's one thing I would definitely tell you to look at your policies. And if you use your personal lines insurance agent for your childcare center, you probably have three numbers because that's what they're used to: per person, per accident, and third-party claims. Another one, this is probably my favorite. This really is what triggered me when we were looking at purchasing the school, was your EPLI, Employment Practices Liability. This is truly the most overlooked and underutilized policy that's out there for childcare. We all have bad days. We all get short at times. We don't mean to be. A lot of times it's an accident, and we can snap and possibly say things we shouldn't say. So to me, the EPLI policy is I had a bad day policy, and I popped off and I may have said something I shouldn't. It keeps me covered. So really what it's designed for, it's going to cover your business against any claims by a worker that their legal rights as employees of the company have been violated. So whether it's sexual harassment, discrimination, wrongful termination, breach of employment contract, and another one for those of you who do offer employee benefits, it covers any mismanagement of employee benefits. To me, that's a big one. So if you've got a CPA, your accountant, anyone who's trying to manage that employee benefit plan and someone did not get enrolled and winds up needing it, you have coverage. But I tell you what, there's no way today, in today's society especially, I would own a policy without carrying that. And again, those come in $500,000 and $1 million policies, but really take a good long look with me, your agent, at the EPLI policy. And I know I've got some friends out there that are attorneys. That's probably the first question they ask when someone comes in with one of these things. Do you have the employment practices liability? If they say no, you're in trouble. If they say yes, okay, let's have a conversation. We can defend this, and you have a policy that can cover should a claim arise. So move on to the next one.
Now, Blake,
Workers' comp.
I heard the average claim is like $400,000. The average cost with legal fees and fines and things like that. Average is $400,000. So if you do not have EPLI, that childcare owner is on the hook for that $400,000, which is the average. And attorneys have told me that number is huge.
Oh,
You have
absolutely.
to pay it yourself.
And you
We
think about that
actually-
for a minute. Do you have $400,000 sitting in the bank to cover that? Or are we about to have to close the center down and sell out to attempt to pay the lawsuit? Which maybe we could have bought this policy for $1,500 a year and we don't have this problem.
Yeah.
Accidents happen. And to me, this is complete accident. And the way the world is becoming, I think the discrimination piece of it is what we're fixing to start seeing more and more of.
For sure.
We actually found out about this insurance because an employee threatened to sue us for discrimination. They never sued us, but the first thing we found out is we didn't have this insurance.
Because we were using our local
Our-
insurance.
our
This is before we
agent
met
said-
Aleaf.
Our agent
Mhm.
said, no, they won't cover it. You don't have employee liability. We're like,
What's
why
that?
not?
Because your local agent knew, he did
Yeah.
not tell it to us.
Yeah.
Until we met you guys, we didn't know what we needed. You don't
Right.
know what you don't know. That's why we have partnered with you. So you can,
Absolutely.
our
And
audience knows what they know.
there's very few agents out there in the nation who truly specialize in childcare. I can almost count from an agency standpoint on one hand. Most out there, they do a little bit of everything, but not all childcare. And that's what we are. I mean, we understand the risks, the liabilities, what the childcare owners out there are really up against every day. So that's one thing to think about when you're looking for an agent. Make sure that they know your business. That's what they specialize in. Because like what you just said, that EPLI, I'm sure it made you a little bit nervous when the first threat came over, but had you had that policy, you would have been a lot more at ease. We wouldn't have had any worries, and you could have just moved on about the day. If we need to file a claim, you're covered. We can do that for you.
Mhm.
All right. So the next one is workers' compensation. And this one is really different from state to state. Some states it's mandatory. Some states it's not. But I'm going to stay with the same theme, $1 million. Here in Texas, to give you an example, it is at will state. So it's not mandatory to carry workers' comp. But what a lot of our owners here don't realize, if you decline workers' compensation, you lose your common rights of defense should an employee get injured and sued. So some people, and gosh, over the last 15 years, I bet workers' compensation pricing wise has probably gone down 80%. Very inexpensive in Texas, since it's a at will state. But so many people don't carry it, but yet don't understand that they can't defend themselves should an employee sue them for getting injured at the school. I would rather spend my couple $1,000s a year, make sure my employees are taken care of should one of them get injured on the job. And the injuries we see are backs. Backs and knees are the two biggest ones. Outside, I mean, we'll get some burns and things of that nature on the cook side, but really that leaning over, bending your back down to pick up a heavier child, that's usually the number one claim on the workers' comp and child care is the back. Well, the back's one of those things that it can linger on for an extended period of time. I would much rather spend the money, have workers' compensation, let workers' compensation take care of them. You know what? If they do have to miss work from a serious injury, we're going to be able to pay part of their salary to them. So they're not going to go without pay. And myself as an owner is not having to make that out of pocket along with their medical bills. I'm just in a much better position spending pennies on the dollar from a medical claim to just purchasing a workers' compensation claim up front. And the big one that sits over everything, your umbrella policy. That one, again, stay with it, $1 million at minimum. I say if you're a multiple center owner, the $1 million is not enough. We need to bump that up according to number of centers you have. I've seen the umbrellas anywhere from 1 million, really in the child care spectrum, up to about 10 million. But one thing to look at with the umbrella, what is it truly going to sit over? It's never going to sit over your property. It should sit over your auto. Should you be involved in a bad accident, multiple children in the bus? Okay. Is $1 million really going to cover everything? Maybe, maybe not. But I know if I have $1 million umbrella sitting on top of it, well, now I have $2 million to cover that. The general liability side, that's the biggest one to look for your underlying coverages. A lot of companies out there will exclude abuse and molestation. If they do, you do not want that umbrella policy. You want to make sure that umbrella sits on top of abuse and molestation. So if you have a claim, that $1 million is added to the current $1 million you have. And what I've personally seen is one claim can turn into 4 very quickly. So we saw one just the other day. It was an abuse claim based on the way a child was put down to nap. Well, they got a hold of an attorney. Attorney found, and I again don't know how, found a list of a lot of the the parents. And all of a sudden, 2, 3, 4 other parents start coming forward saying, oh yeah, well, something similar to this happened to my child, something similar to this happened to mine. So what started out as 1 ended up as 4 possible claims in a matter of a week. Wow. Well, should something like that happen, that's where that umbrella policy is very, very necessary, because we can eat up $1 million in 4 claims very quickly. $2 million is just that much better to be sitting on should things like that happen. And there's those attorneys out there that are just geared that way. They're trying to make a buck. Let's see how many people we can bring into this to how much more money they could possibly make on this. So umbrella, definitely look into it. Definitely make sure it sits over your abuse and molestation. All right. So now we're going to kind of jump back to where we started about the general liability side. So remember, I told you in the beginning that it excludes injury to child unless you are sued. Okay. So the student accident policy is where we can take care of this for you. And when I say student accident policy, I mean, it's dirt cheap. You're talking about $6.60 per student per year. That's going to put a $200,000 policy on all of them. Each individual student has $200,000 on them, and it will act as primary coverage. The benefit of having this as primary coverage, let's say you have a student enrolled, the parent loses their job, 2 days later, that child gets hurt. Now that parent has no insurance. That's fine. We have primary coverage that will take care of that parent immediately. I know if I made a phone call to a parent, hey, little Johnny fell off the playground, think he broke his arm, but we're going to take care of you. So if I'm going to pay the medical bills, I do everything right up front, I've got a good chance I'm probably not going to get sued by that parent because we took care of our student. So the GL really sits in, it's great service to our parents and our children, but B, it protects our general liability. So everybody's always worried about filing a claim because just the world out there, if I file a claim, my insurance goes up, then it becomes unaffordable. If you file a claim on your student accident, that doesn't affect any of your policies. That's the beauty of it. So I don't care if I make one claim, if you make 10 claims in that year, that's not going to affect your general liability, your abuse and molestation. That's not going to affect all your policies from increasing. So don't be scared to, if you have a student accident, use it. It's not going to change your rates the following year. Use it, use it, use it, use it, use it. And you know, that's kind of in a nutshell. I mean, for a short period of time, all the minimums and policies that I think are needed to run a day-to-day child care operation.
Perfect. Blake, what's your contact number for somebody to get a hold of you?
I am 972-866-4065. And you can see us on aleafinsurance.com. And then my email is blake@aleafinsurance.com.
It's ALEAF. And we'll post that in our show notes for you.
Okay.
And each week we do a mindset question. What's your happy place?
The lake.
Ours too.
That's where I just, whether it be with the family or I can go sit out there by myself in peace and quiet, just something about the water. Just that's, if I can choose anywhere to be, I'd say lake, ocean, just give me water, give me peace, and I'm good.
We're the same way. We live on a lake, so we get to see it every day, and it's just it's a happy. We live in our happy place. We like to say that.
That would be nice.
Well, Blake, you really have helped our audience today. It actually taught me a couple things too. Every time I talk to you, I learned that little bit piece. And we were just talking about upping our limits from the building costs, which we haven't done yet either. So we're going to get on the phone today and make sure that we up that. We didn't even think about that we're at probably limits, $100, $150 a square foot when it needs to be 200 in our market. So that's 25% increase in our building replacement cost. So thanks for that tip. We appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. So if you're listening today and you need to look at your policies, you would like Blake to look at it, I'm sure that if they give you a call, you'll look at their policy for them, tell them what they need, and show them how they can get a good deal through Aleaf Insurance.
Absolutely. And one more thing real quick, Brian, just to let everyone know, and I completely just skipped over it. On the auto side, even if you don't have transportation, you need to have a hired and non-owned policy. That's a big piece. If you're not familiar with it, call me. I'll talk to you about it. But that's one thing to look at on the auto side.
Yeah, your director runs to the store and gets some milk. You need that non-owned policy to protect you. If she gets in an accident, she's on the clock. Yep. And you're in big trouble if that happens. So and there's so many different situations. So yeah, we've had that for many years. Thanks to Aleaf telling us that we needed that. We had no idea. So we really appreciate you guys, and thanks for protecting us and our kids and our families and our centers. And we know you protect a lot of our listeners too. So thanks for joining us on the Child Care Genius podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
But Blake is a really cool guy, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and he knows a lot about insurance.
Yeah, he talks a little bit funny, but that's okay. Maine people talk funny too. We're not original Mainers, so we don't talk like that. But anyway, he sure knows a lot about protecting people, and it's passion of his. And whenever we're talking, whenever we've been together, we've had dinner with him, and really gotten to know him, and he really is passionate about the industry. And we know the owner of Aleaf Insurance, and his heart is pure too. His name is Junaid. He's a good friend of ours, and they really want to help you. So we recommend give them a call, aleafinsurance.com. And we'll put the information in the show notes.
Yep. And enrollment is now open for Child Care Genius University, which is launching December 1st, 2022.
So if you need coaching, training, or mentorship in any area of your childcare business, visit childcaregenius.com/university for more information.
And we're here to help you.
Yeah, we're so excited about this program. It's going to be different than any other coaching program out there. And just like I said, go to childcaregenius.com/university to see our faculty that we've hired. We have an amazing team of professors who are going to be teaching inside the university, and we're going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives. This concludes episode 13 of the Child Care Genius podcast.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a future episode. And we'll see you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Childcare Genius podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please do us a favor and hit the subscribe button so you won't miss a future episode. Don't forget to visit our website at childcaregenius.com to see a list of services we offer to help your childcare business grow. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the Childcare Genius community.